Salutations YouTube, what is going on? Why am I recording a lot more? Well, I say a lot more, this is my third video in like 2 weeks, so not really a lot, is it? If you saw my last two videos, my first one was about Dennis Nilsson. This video is going to be somewhat similar to Dennis Nilsson. A kind of a warped cunt. Now, first of all, if you're subscribed to my channel, then you may have seen my poll. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, what the fuck, I thought we were friends. Anyway, let's just get on with it. So, like Dennis Nilsson, this Milwaukee serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, kept the corpses of his victims lying around his home. He went one step further than Nilsson, however. In an effort to possess them more completely, he began eating their flesh, reasoning that they would thus become a part of him and therefore stay with him forever. Well, if you're eating their flesh and they're a part of you forever, what happens if you need to go for a shit? They're going to leave you then. Pun intended. Dahmer began his murderous career at the age of 18, at a time when his parents were going through a acrimonious divorce. Probably saying that wrong. Dahmer's father had already left home. His mother was away on holiday and Dahmer was alone. In the house, feeling very neglected, he therefore went out to look for company and picked up a hitchhiker, a 19-year-old named Stephen Hicks, who had spent the day at a rock concert. They got on well and Dahmer took Hicks back to his parents' house, where they had a few beers and talked about their lives. When Hicks said that he had to go, Dahmer begged him to stay, but Hicks was insistent, so Dahmer made him stay by picking up a heavy dumbbell, clubbing him around the head with it and then strangling him. Dahmer dragged Hicks' body into the crawl space under the house and dismembered it with a hunting knife. He had plenty of practice doing that because his childhood hobby had been dissecting animals. Bit of a weird fucking hobby. When I was a child, I was fucking playing in dirt. Anyway, each to their own, I guess. Even though he had wrapped Hicks' body parts in plastic bags, the stench of rotting flesh soon permeated the house, so that night Dahmer buried them in a nearby wood. Becoming afraid that the local children would find the grave, he then dug them up again, stripped off the flesh and pulverised the bones with a sledgehammer before scattering the remains around his garden and the neighbouring property. It would be 10 years before Dahmer would kill again. Obviously, he went to the army, trained to be a combat medic, and a few bits and bobs. Watch the series on Netflix, you'll find out. After that, Dahmer moved to Milwaukee to live with his grandma. A loner, he hung out in gay bars. If another customer chatted him up, he would slip drugs into their drink and they would often fall into a coma. He made no attempt to rape them, he was simply experimenting, but when the owner of the club bar ended up in the hospital, Dahmer was barred from it. In 1996, Dahmer was sentenced to a year's probation for exposing himself and masturbating publicly in front of two 12-year-old boys. Nonce. He claimed that he had been urinated and promised the judge that it wouldn't happen again. Yeah, a leopard can't change its spots, mate. 6 days after the end of his probation period, he picked up the 24-year-old Stephen Tuomi in a gay club and went to the Ambassador Hotel with him to have sex. When Dahmer awoke, he found Tuomi lying dead. There was blood surrounding his mouth and bruising around his neck. Dahmer had been drunk the night before and realised that he must have strangled Tuomi. Now he was alone with a corpse in a hotel room, and at any moment a porter would be checking to see whether the room had been vacated. In a controlled state of panic, he rushed out and bought a large suitcase, into which he stuffed Tuomi's body before taking it back by taxi to his grandma's house, the taxi driver even helping him to drag the heavy case inside. Dahmer then cut up the corpse and put the pieces into plastic bags which he left outside for refuse collectors. He performed this task regularly so well that he had left no traces at all. When police investigated the disappearance of Tuomi called at the house, there was no sign of the body. Dahmer had got away with his second murder. Companionship, sex and death were now inextricably linked in Dahmer's mind. 4 months later, he picked up a young male prostitute and went back with him to his grandma's house to have sex in the basement. Grandma... Fucking... Fucking grandma. Fuck it now. Dahmer then gave the boy a drink laced with powerful sedative. When the young man was unconscious, he strangled him. He then dismembered the corpse, stripped off the flesh, crushed the bones to the powder and scattered the remains. 2 months later, Dahmer met an impoverished 22-year-old homosexual and offered him money to perform in the video. Having agreed, the man had oral sex with Dahmer in his grandma's basement. When it was over, Dahmer offered him a drink, drugged and strangled him, and finally disposed of the corpse. Dahmer's grandma began to complain about the terrible smell that persisted even after the rubbish had been collected. She also found a patch of blood in the garage. By way of explanation, Dahmer said that he had been skinning animals there, which is an excuse that she somehow accepted. I don't think my grandma would accept if I was skinning animals. Although she made it clear that she wanted him to move out. Dahmer consequently found himself a small flat in a rundown, predominantly black area. On his first night, he lured Conorax and Synthasamphone, I'm probably butchering that, a 13-year-old Laotian boy, to the flat and drugged him. Oh no, Conorax the geezer he killed, isn't it? This is fucking Kaysen. The boy managed to escape, however, and Dahmer was arrested. Charged with sexual assault and enticing a minor for immoral purposes. He spent a week in jail before being released on bail. Yeah, I got mixed up. Conorax, Kaysen. Dahmer could not control his compulsion to kill, and while out on bail picked up Anthony Sears, a handsome 26-year-old bisexual. Fearing that the police were watching his flat, he took Sears to his grandmother's basement instead. After they had sex, Dahmer drugged Sears and dismembered his body, disposing of his corpse in the rubbish but keeping his skull as a souvenir. In court, the district attorney punished for a sentence of 5 years imprisonment for Dahmer's assault on Synthasamphone. For his part, Dahmer's attorney argued that the attack was a one-off offence, continuing that his client was a homosexual and a heavy drinker who needed psychiatric help and not punishment. Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years on probation as well as a year in a correctional program. It didn't help, however, for Dahmer was now set in his murderous ways. After picking up a young stranger in a club, he offered him money to pose for nude photographs. Back in Dahmer's flat, the youth accepted a drink which Dahmer had drugged. When he lapsed into unconsciousnness, Dahmer strangled and stripped him off before performing oral sex on the corpse. He then dismembered the body again. And I'll give anyone 2p to figure out which part of the body he kept, which he painted grey. He picked up another notorious homosexual known as the Sheik. He did the same to him, except that this time he engaged in oral sex before drugging and strangling him. His next victim, a 15-year-old boy who had accepted Dahmer's offer of $200 for posing in the nude, was luckier. Again, nonce. Although the boy undressed, Dahmer had neglected to drug him before attacking him with a rubber mallet. Dahmer then tried to strangle him, but the boy fought back. Eventually, Dahmer calmed down, and after the boy had promised not to inform the police, he let him go, calling him a taxi. "Alright mate, you're a fucking taxi." When he went to... Oh, it's a shit joke, I apologise for that. When he went to hospital for treatment the next day, however, the boy broke his promise and told the police what had happened. But because he begged them not to let his foster parents find out he was a homosexual, they dropped the matter. The next time that Dahmer picked up a victim, a few weeks later, he craved more than his usual formula of sex, murder and dismemberment. As if that wasn't already enough, mate. Having decided to keep the skeleton and to bleach it with acid. Although he dissolved most of his victims' flesh in acid, he left the biceps intact and stored them in the fridge. When his neighbours began to complain about the smell of putrefying flesh that was coming from Dahmer's flat, he apologised, saying that his fridge was broken and that he was waiting to have it fixed. Dahmer's next victim, the 23-year-old David Thomas, was not gay. Although he had a girlfriend and a 3-year-old daughter, he nevertheless accepted Dahmer's offer to come back to his flat for money. After drugging him, Dahmer realised that he did not fancy his latest pickup, but killed him anyway, fearing that Thomas might otherwise cause trouble when he woke up. This time he took more pleasure in the dismemberment process, photographing it step by step. Weird that you can actually see the Polaroids on the internet. Well, only a select few. I've seen them. I do not recommend them if you've just finished eating a kebab. 19-year-old Curtis Strouter, I'm probably saying that wrong as well, an aspiring model, was engaged in oral sex with Dahmer when the sleeping potion took effect. Dahmer strangled him and again photographed his dismemberment. His skull was also kept as a trophy. The 19-year-old Errol Lindsay's murder proceeded along exactly the same lines, Dahmer offering him money to pose for nude photographs before drugging, strangling and dismembering him. The grisly process was once again recorded photographically and his skull was added to Dahmer's collection. The 31-year-old deaf-mute Tony Hughes also accepted the $50 to pose in the nude and was duly murdered. But by this time Dahmer had become so blasé about the whole procedure that he kept Hughes' body in his bedroom for several days before cutting it up. Dahmer's next victim was Synthasophone's brother, 14-year-old Konorak. In Keeson's case, things went badly wrong for Dahmer, who, after drugging, stripping and raping the boy, went out to buy some beer instead of strangling him. On his way back to the flat, Dahmer saw a naked and bleeding Konorak talking to two girls on the street. When Dahmer tried to grab him, the girls hung onto Konorak. One of them had called the police and 2 patrol cars soon arrived. The police wanted to know what the trouble was about and Dahmer claimed that he and Konorak had a lover's tiff. He managed to convince him that the 14-year-old Konorak was really 19. Hat trick, mate. Nonce. And after taking them to his flat, showed them Polaroids of Konorak in his underwear, which seemed to back up his story that they were lovers. The police, however, did not realise that the photographs had actually been taken earlier that day, while Konorak was drugged. Throughout all of this, Konorak sat passively on the sofa, thinking that his ordeal was over. In fact, it only just began. The police accepted Dahmer's story and left, whereupon Dahmer immediately strangled and then dismembered the boy. The policemen in question that gave him back to Dahmer were later dismissed. On one occasion, Dahmer was returning home after attending Gay Pride Day in Chicago when he picked up another would-be model, Matt Turner. Pardon me. Turner was also strangled and dismembered at Dahmer's flat. On meeting Dahmer in a gay club, the 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger asked his former roommate whether he should go with him, to which the roommate replied, "Sure, he looks okay." Dahmer seems to have liked Weinberger, whatever his name is, for they spent... You know what, I'm just going to call him Jeremiah. Dahmer seemed to have liked Jeremiah, for they spent the whole of the next day together having sex. Then when Jeremiah looked at the clock and said that it was time that he went, Dahmer asked him to stay just for one more drink. His head ended up next to Turner's in the freezer. No to get ahead of yourself, Dahmer. See what I did there. When Dahmer lost his job, he knew that one thing alone would make him feel better. He accordingly picked up a 24-year-old man called Oliver Lacey and took him back to his flat, where he strangled him and sodomized his corpse. 4 days later, the 25-year-old Joseph Braidholt, who was married with 2 children, accepted Dahmer's offer for money for nude photographs and willingly engaged in oral sex with him. His dismembered torso was left to soak in a dustbin filled with acid. By the time that Dahmer had killed 17 men, all in much the same way, he was becoming so casual about murder that it was perhaps inevitable that he would be caught. On 22nd of June 1991, Dahmer met Tracy Edwards, a young man who had just arrived from Mississippi. He was with a number of friends, so Dahmer invited them all to his flat for a party. He and Tracy would go ahead in a taxi to buy some beer, he said, instructing the others to follow later. Edwards went along with his plan, but did not realise that Dahmer was giving his friends the wrong address. When he got there, Edwards found that he did not like Dahmer's flat. It smelt funny, and there was also a fish tank in which Dahmer kept some Siamese fighting fish. As Dahmer told lurid tales about the fish fighting each other to the death, Edwards glanced nervously at the clock as he sipped his cold beer. After he had finished the beer, Dahmer gave Edwards a drugged drink of rum and coke. When Edwards became drowsy, Dahmer put his arms round him and whispered that they would go to bed. Within an instant, Edwards was wide awake and telling Dahmer that it was all a mistake and that he had to be going. Before he knew it, however, his hands had been one of his hands were handcuffed, and Dahmer was poking a butcher's knife at his chest while ordering to undress. Realising the seriousness of the situation, Edwards knew that he had to humour the man, to make him relax and slowly unbutton his shirt. Dahmer then suggested that they go into the bedroom and escorted Edwards there at knife point. The room was decorated with Polaroid photos of Jaeger? Polaroid photographs of naked young men, where there were also pictures of dismembered bodies and chunks of meat. The smell in the room was sickening. The putrid aroma seemed to be coming from a plastic dustbin under the window. I mean, it was more like a vat of acid, but yeah. Edwards thought that he could guess the rest. Dahmer wanted to watch a video with his captive friend, so they sat on the bed and watched The Exorcist. The gruesome film made Dahmer relax, while Edwards was frantically thinking of ways in which to escape. If Edwards did not comply with his requests, Dahmer then, he didn't threaten. He said that he was going to rip his heart out and eat it. Next, he told Edwards to strip so that he could photograph him in the nude. As Dahmer reached for the camera, Edwards seized his opportunity and punched Dahmer in the side of the head. When Dahmer crumpled up, Edwards kicked him in the stomach and ran for the door. Dahmer managed to catch up with him and offered to unlock the handcuffs, but Edwards ignored him, wrenching the door open and running for his life. Halfway down 25th Street, Edwards spotted a police car and ran over to it, yelling for help. Once inside the car, he explained to the policeman that a maniac had tried to kill him and directed him to Dahmer's flat. The door was answered by a well-groomed man who seemed calm and composed. The police began to have doubts about the story that Edwards had told him, until they noticed a strange smell. Pardon me again. A contrite-looking Dahmer admitted that he had threatened Edwards, explaining that he had just lost his job and had been drinking. But when the police asked for the key to the handcuffs, he refused to hand it over and became violent, whereupon the policeman pushed him into the flat and forced him to lie face down on the floor while they read him his rights. They then began to look around the flat, one of them opening the fridge door. He said, "Oh my God, there's a goddamn head in here." Dahmer began to scream like an animal, and the police rushed outside to get some shackles, handcuffs I should say, with which to restrain him. After that, they began their search of the flat in earnest. They ascertained that the fridge contained meat, including a human heart in plastic bags. There were 3 human heads in the freezer, a filing cabinet contained grotesque photographs, 3 human skulls, and a collection of bones. 2 more skulls were found in a pot on the stove. That's an oven. Another pot contained male genitals and severed hands. That's handy. While the remains of 3 male torsos were found in the dustbin in the bedroom. At the police station, Dahmer seemed almost relieved that his murderous spree was over. He made a detailed confession and admitted that he had now reached a stage at which he was cooking and eating his victims' bodies. Dahmer's cannibalism and necrophilia were the cornerstones of his plea of insanity, but the district attorney pointed out to the jury that if Dahmer were to be found insane, sent to a mental hospital, his case would be reviewed in 2 years' time, further explaining that if he was then found to be sane, he could be released. The jury then found Jeffrey Dahmer guilty of 15 murders, for which he received 15 life sentences. Well, it was actually more than that. I wanted to keep this one short because everyone knows who the fuck Jeffrey Dahmer is. I just wanted to wrap it up a little bit. And here's a fun fact for you. on the same day he got baptized, John Wayne Gacy was being executed, and there was a lunar eclipse on the same day. It's essentially a birth, a death, and an eclipse. He was later killed in prison by a man called Christopher Scarver, who was already in prison for murder. He said he wasn't happy with what Dahmer had done. I mean, not that anyone would be happy with what Dahmer did. He's just fucking sick. And he said that he was pissing off prisoners because Dahmer kept making body parts out of food and the ketchup resembled blood. His mum wanted to donate his brain to science, whereas his dad argued that if Dahmer should be buried, the whole body, including the brain, should be buried. But that was a twisted tale of Jeffrey Dahmer. I hope you like this video. If you do, please give it a thumbs up, leave a little comment, call me an idiot, just say anything. Yeah, do anything, like subscribe. Really, apparently it really helps me out. I'm torn between 3 for my next video. Let me know. There's either John Wayne Gacy, Jack the Ripper again, or the Moors murderers. Let me know. And please like, subscribe, and peace.